My favorite cartoon growing up, or one of my major favorites, was Mucha Lucha. Even though the show really didn't age all that gracefully in regards to animation, what types of tropes or character archetypes they lean on, etc., it's definitely a product of the early 2000s. I would argue that there are a couple of strengths for why the show would be worth revisiting. The biggest one is the ensemble cast. You have Ricochet, the Flea, and Buena Girl as the leads. But there are several episodes that bring one of the secondary characters to the front, if not outright stars them in the leading role. You have food-themed wrestlers, clown wrestlers, a whole bunch of different wrestlers with a unique theme, color scheme, motif, and something new that they bring to the ring when they're facing off against somebody. It's interesting to see just what different moves these characters will have pitted against each other and how they clash or how the writers might go about deciding which one is more powerful. Because you could have a tiny pint-sized guy like Ricochet, who's probably 50 to 60 pounds, facing off against a 200-pound guy who's probably 2-3 years older than him. And it plays with cartoon suspension of disbelief, and the entire show is a love letter to masked wrestling as an art form, as a physical activity. Just after revisiting the show several years later, somebody from the team on Warner Brothers actually went out of their way to set up an archival Tumblr with, they uploaded storyboards, sort of concept art, sketches. There's even a few tidbits about what the original pilot for this show would have been like, how much different it was. The biggest thing that got me was that in some of the original pitch bibles or concept art for the show, they were originally going to include the different steps and the different pins involved in mass wrestling, but Warner Brothers wouldn't let them. They wouldn't let them do it. Because of TVPG or imitatable violence or something ridiculous like that, that's why when the characters go for the final pin in the show, you have a flashy title card pop up instead. I would love to see how the show would turn out if the animators and crew had been allowed to show the different wrestling pins and how to properly perform them. There'd be so much more dynamic action and movement. You already have some of it with the characters kind of climbing on top of the tent poles for the wrestling ring. I'm sorry, I don't know the technical term for this. And just taking that dynamic dive or dramatic dive into the ring to tackle their opponent to the mat. I would have loved to see the pins in action. It would have been a really surreal and fun treat to see actual mass wrestling moves alongside the ridiculous transformations that you have the characters go through. Their signature move being transforming into a giant bulldozer, or a lot of the various other things that the characters have transformed into over the course of the series. This is one of those shows that I honestly think there's a lot of room for a reboot or a reimagining. I would love to see somebody take another crack at aspiring masked wrestlers going to a school for masked wrestling and getting to go the full 9 yards that Mucha Lucha didn't get to. There's already a lot of creative imagery, visuals, and approach to this particular cartoon, and considering what kinds of cartoons are floating around out there right now, heck, ENJQ's pilot for Lakewood Plaza Turbo finally got greenlit, and that shows one of the big things for that show seems to be how much different their approach to animation or animation style is compared to other cartoons. All of the frames are pencil lines. They're not even ink, they're just pencil lines. So it's definitely going to have a slightly different feel or aesthetic compared to something like Steven Universe or Regular Show or what Cartoon Network's fare is. And this show, it looks like a lot of the highlights for it are the fight scenes. Just the callbacks to Dragon Ball Z or just over-the-top action scenes in this kind of noodle arm style. I would love to see Mucha Lucha make a comeback with the sort of later 2000s style, somewhere between what stylization it had in the early 2000s toon, with what kind of stylization cartoons have evolved to now, and just imagine what kind of energy could be brought to the screen with how far technology has progressed, how much emphasis there could be on energetic, just letting the characters go off model character models. Just so much potential. And on top of that, if they were allowed to show the wrestling pins, you could have that couple of sequences be animated a little bit more realistically than the balls to the wall craziness that the rest of the series would be. There is so much freaking potential for a show about masked wrestlers with animation where it is right now. Okay, aside from that digression on my part, Mucha Lucha is also technically a pioneer in animation history. It was the very first cartoon to use Adobe Flash. So you could say that Mucha Lucha was the predecessor to productions like Dan Versus or My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Just imagine some of these later fantastic scenes in Friendship is Magic where they probably integrated other programs, really stepped it up with Adobe After Effects, and the animation is fluid. You have lots of different focus on lighting and atmosphere. It took this first kind of clunky, awkward Flash toon being put on WB's TV network to lead to what we have today with how impressive Flash animation can be. Now, in Mucha Lucha's defense in regards to being the first Flash animated toon to be on TV, this was still when Flash was considered just a tool to make slapdash or simple webtoons. It was seen as strictly a medium for webtoons, not a bigger, sort of more detailed production. Mucha Lucha was a step in a direction that most people didn't really see Flash getting used for. They were building this bigger, sort of, more colorful and diverse community where it's a thing that these kids go to a mass wrestling school to learn how to wrestle. You have that, you have the donut shop, all the different places that show up throughout town. It's just a slightly larger scale production than just a couple of sprites or something moving around to music for your typical webtoon of that particular era. It's just kind of interesting to think about in that particular respect. Mucha Lucha was an animation pioneer. Man. I guess the biggest thing, I don't really have any point here. I just wanted to discuss one of my favorite shows, I suppose, and I'm definitely going to leave a link in the description below to the Mucha Lucha Tumblr blog. And on an aside, if I were ever going to help somebody make a pitch or a pilot for a cartoon, I would be more likely to throw my hat in the ring and get ridiculously excited about it if it were about masked wrestlers or masked wrestling. Something in the same vein, or that has shades of what kind of premise Mucha Lucha has or El Tigre has. Those would be the ones that rope me in right away. Count me in. Count me in on a production like that. I would love to come up with character sketches, whatever else. That's the concept that would rope me in immediately, because, my god, that is a cartoon that I desperately want to see come to TV again. Another cartoon like that.